So today I'm refuting the speech made by Kusai about large women images, media, and policy. And his main claim was that health issues overweight women face are caused by social expectations. And my main counter to his claim is on his analysis of the evidence, and other than that, I completely support his argument, but I felt that the analysis of his evidence was a little short. The secondary claims that he made were the use of fat stereotypes for entertainment have harmful consequence to the viewing audience. Number two, because women are being misrepresented, they face high levels of discrimination in work and social settings. And three, the overwhelming weight of social stereotypes on large women affects both the physical and mental health of large women. So for the first secondary claim, he talked about the article on Fat Monica from Friends, and he relied too much on the analysis given by Holly Harper, the author of the article, in saying that a plus size high school student would not be an anomaly, and doesn't really expand on how this conclusion came to be. How was this? What are these statistics that show that this is actually true? So a statistic that he could have used for this is from the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System in 2015 that puts overweight high school students around 16%, which still is not really too common, but it's also not an anomaly. So the claim isn't particularly strong based on the statistics. And for his reasoning on the conclusion that he ends his conclusion on that article by saying that they, the audience, looks at Fat Monica and they feel belittled by looking at the way that they make fun of Fat Monica, but he is simply restating what the article said when it says that anyone who identifies as such would be distraught to see a character that represents them being made into the butt of a joke. This is a quote from the source that he used, and he's simply restating what the source said and not actually making an analysis of his own. For the secondary claim about that women are misrepresented and face high levels of discrimination in work and social settings, there isn't too much analysis on how we can record this discrimination in the workforce for women. So some of the examples that he could have used the same article from Fat Monica, because it does reference a second actress, Melissa McCarthy, who is considered to be a plus-sized celebrity. He could have used this example to strengthen the view that women in work settings who are plus-sized tend to be made just the comedic sidekick, or not really a main role as opposed to other more popular actresses. And then his third claim about the overwhelming weight of social stereotypes on large women that affects both the physical and mental health of large women. There are no statistics to show that the women who are overweight are facing these struggles with their mental and physical health, only the claims from the article itself. So some statistics on this would help to show, to further prove his point, but I do not feel that with the lack of evidence or statistics that he was able to prove his point. So in conclusion, while his argument does have some grounds to it, I felt that the lack of evidence and statistics did take down his credibility quite a bit. Thank you.
Well, you identify the main proposition. I do think that you have this kind of presumption here that the advocate is correct, but you're going to simply suggest that they didn't do a very good job of proving their case. I don't think you want to give an editorial comment like that. As the frequent example that I use is if you were the defense attorney in a trial and you simply said, well, yeah, the prosecution probably has it right. My client is guilty, but let me show you why they didn't prove it. That's not going to get you very far, you know. So just take the position that the proof is missing and stick with that. I do also see a tendency in several of the, actually in all three of the points, where you are actually giving kind of an evaluation more than a refutation. You suggest at one point, for instance, that there is evidence that proves a point in the article, and then you proceed to give that evidence. So in essence, you do what the advocate should have done instead of telling us simply that they didn't make this argument, they didn't present any evidence, and they could have, because here's the evidence that does that. That's exactly the kind of thing that you don't want to be doing. That's their responsibility to present that evidence. You tell us what they failed to do, or if there's contradictory information, point out that contradictory information. The article on, that talks about the television characters is okay. There are a couple of things where you basically say, look, they're simply restating the point there. Well, yes, but there is an inference being made, so I don't think that there's a good reason to believe that inference if the evidence doesn't give an explanation for that, if it's just conclusionary. I think the reasoning argument that you presented at one point was that, that this is not necessarily typical, although then you turned around and said, like I said, the 16% of the girls in high school are plus sizes, so that is something that's fairly typical. Like you proved the argument for the advocate on that point. That's the thing. That was the one that I was thinking of. I think the challenge on the second point, that there's a lack of data that connects this to discrimination. That's okay. I do think you could perhaps find some information that shows that plus size women have equal incomes. They exist in different stratas of businesses or culture. You could identify examples of women who have been successful despite the negative stereotypes of their plus sizes. You mentioned a couple of actresses, for instance, that would fit in that category. I think that those kinds of things would be indicative that says, this contradicts the generalization that the advocate's presenting. Here are some exceptions, and you can present those exceptions, and you don't quite get there, even though you have, like I said, at least one good example, and I can think of two or three others that would fit in that category as well. And then about the issue of health and mental health, I think on the mental health issue, the challenge that there aren't any statistics is okay. On the health issue, maybe it's the weight that creates the health arguments there. I'm not exactly sure what the advocate's argument on that point was, but that maybe would be a good way of responding to that point. All right, thank you. John, do you have that
Yeah.
evaluation rubric? Because you're going to be next, and I need the rubric.